Good afternoon. The high-level political forum on sustainable development is ongoing, and Indigenous peoples are actively involved to ensure that they're not left behind in the 2030 agenda. The three speakers we have here today will discuss the progress made so far for Indigenous peoples, and they will share their thoughts on how to secure the rights and contributions of Indigenous peoples in the 2030 agenda. So we have Joan Carling. She's an Indigenous Igorot activist from the Philippines. She's been working on Indigenous issues at the grassroots and international levels for more than 20 years. She was elected twice as the Secretary General of the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, and she has served as an expert member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. In the middle, we have Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim. She's the coordinator of the Indigenous Women and Peoples Association of Chad, a community-based organization working for Indigenous rights and environmental protection. Ms. Ibrahim belongs to the Pearl Mbororo pastoralist community of Chad, and she's a member of the Global Steering Committee of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group, and she's a co-chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. And she has just recently been named an emerging explorer by National Geographic. And on the far end, we have Ms. Tarcila Rivera from Peru. She's an expert member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. She's a Quechua, a journalist, and has been advocating for Indigenous people's rights, especially those related to women, children, and Indigenous youth. Her organization, Chirapac, promotes the empowerment of Indigenous women, intercultural education, food sovereignty, and the struggle against racism and discrimination. So they will each make brief remarks and then take your questions. We'll start with Joan. Thanks.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I think there's a significant progress in terms of the development agendas if we compare the MDGs to the SDGs. If we recall, from the MDGs, it's clearly focused on economic growth. It does not have data disaggregation, and it's narrowly defining poverty. So now with the SDGs, also because of the active engagement of Indigenous peoples and other groups, there are now clear reference to human rights, particularly stating that the SDG should respect and realize human rights. So that's one big improvement. The other one is that it requires data disaggregation by ethnicity. So that means we will then now become visible in the SDGs. Third is that it calls for a balanced implementation of 3 dimensions of the SDGs, which are the economic, social, and social, environment, and economic dimensions of sustainable development. So from the perspective of Indigenous peoples who has been engaging in the development process, these are opportunities that can provide us a better environment to also push not only for the recognition of our rights, but more importantly, our contributions to development. If we look at the history of Indigenous peoples, we are the ones that are in the most pristine, most conserved areas, biodiversity areas, where because of our lifestyle, our low-carbon lifestyle, and our sustainable resource management, we're able to conserve this for the future generations. So if we're talking of sustainability, Indigenous peoples has always been upholding sustainability with our culture, with our own way of life. And that is something that we are contributing, but is not being recognized. So that is one way of challenging the mainstream development model that is still persisting even with the SDGs. So that is one of the issues that we will keep on pushing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hindou?
Thank you very much. Africa, as the left it behind continent since the last centuries, have this unique opportunity on the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. So in this one, indigenous peoples get a also unique opportunity in Africa because of our life and lifestyle linking with the environment, and this environment is getting more degraded. I can give you an example of the Objective 13 on the climate change impact, where impacted all the indigenous peoples around Africa, that the pastoralists who have them life linked to the environment, the hunter-gatherers and others, and that took us directly to many other objectives where there is an insecurity around the countries, and then the land grabbing, and we have this issue of rights to the land who's involved. But the positive aspect is the growing up quickly of understanding of indigenous people's knowledges, who are the pillars to help the sustainable development. Because the sustainable development, as defined, it's really important to link the human life, environment protections, and also our cultural dimension. So in Africa, this one helped us for centuries to get adapt, mitigate to all the environmental crises. So have been using it now by our countries to get the sustainable model of development. However, it's still a big issue of full and effective participation of indigenous peoples through the national plan of developments, and that maybe need to be changed from now on, because 2030 it's just about tomorrow. So we cannot just stay in one concept saying we do not want to leave anyone behind, and then at the end of the day we will leave them because we do not involve everybody, and especially the indigenous women, girls, and children who do not until now get access to the basic rights as education, health, and clean water. Thank you.
Thank you. Tarcila?
Desde el fondo de mi corazón, mi saludo en la lengua de los incas, que es el quechua, para el mundo. Y mientras mi hermana Joan hacía su intervención, me venía a la mente cuando los pueblos y las organizaciones indígenas en los 80 nos definíamos como pueblos que tomaban los recursos naturales solamente para satisfacer las necesidades y el resto lo dejaba para el uso de las nuevas generaciones. Ahora estamos hablando de desarrollo sostenible. Now we are talking about sustainable development. That was the proper concept of indigenous peoples according with our philosophy. We need and we use only the small quantity that we take for satisfy our basic necessities. And the rest is necessary to preserve for future generations. With this, we have now a very interesting mechanism here in United Nations, and we are talking about SDGs and how indigenous peoples, women, and youth principally are participating in this process. As member of Permanent Forum, including Joan's was member, we gave a very important discussions how indigenous peoples can include and make advocacy from grassroots, national and international arena. Because here in the United Nations, we are talking about global commitments, global plan of action. But the opportunity that we need is how these issues will have real expressions in the change of our lives, and principally to respect our rights to land. Because when we talk, for example, about the first, eliminate the extreme poverty or eliminate the hunger over the world for all, we are thinking that we need to be on the paper with our proper mention and with specific indicators. What will happen with us in our proper territory where we historically use the land for food and for develop our lives. In this situation, we as Permanent Forum, we made many recommendations and presented to the report for this high-level political forum. And the report was substantive. We think that it's very useful for the people who will decide in the next days. And we think, too, it's very important to see and make analysis about the national voluntary reports. In that context, we are trying to pay attention how the civil society and indigenous peoples are participating in the process in the programs for implementation. Because many times we think that it's okay when we send the questionnario or questionnaires, no? But it's not the definite issue, the questionnario. We think it's necessary to exercise and to give the opportunity to participate and make inputs to these national plans, because we need to see the change from grassroots to up. It's okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Waldo, Prensa Latina. I have three questions. First one, 2 years into the implementation of the 2030 agenda, have you seen enough political will from states in order to make possible that no one will be left behind by 2030? And I also want to know if 2 years into the implementation of the agenda, can you mention concrete progress in terms of indigenous people in different of the 17 goals? And the last one, can you mention specific countries that you think are leading the way in terms of the implementation of the 2030 agenda from the perspective of indigenous people? Thank you very much.
Let me answer, and my colleagues will also add. On the issue of political will of states, that is still, unfortunately, lacking, if I may say. If we look at, for example, the VNR, from last year to this year, we had 22 countries last year, and then we have 44. And we looked at how they have incorporated issues of indigenous peoples or did consultations with indigenous peoples. It's really almost, we still remain largely invisible. There are, however, progress in certain countries where they're now finally consulting indigenous peoples in making their plan. For example, the case of Thailand, where they did outreach to the hill tribes. So that's one. Now, on the concrete progress in the implementation of the 17 goals, this is again because countries are still making their plans, adjusting their plans in the past to align it with the SDGs. The good thing is that there is already an acceptance that they need to do data disaggregation, including ethnicity. And at the same time, they acknowledge that that is a major challenge that they face. And we're reaching out to governments to say that we can help in doing that data disaggregation. We have taken initiatives to actually do data disaggregation and monitoring of our situation, and we can provide that kind of information. So that's one area where at least there is already, because that is critical in making us visible, in showing what our real conditions are and what progress are going to be taken. On the third question on what country is sort of leading the way, so far in the countries that have made the report, Norway is the one that is having a good practice in terms of participation. They have actual consultation with the Sami parliament in crafting their implementation plan. They understand that the targets should be contextualized in the realities of the Sami people, because that's the only way they can also have an ownership of the SDGs. So there is already a recognition that they cannot be the one making the plan for indigenous peoples. No, it should be the indigenous peoples, so that they become part of the implementation of the SDGs. And they're open still. The process of even discussing and how to go about the plan is an open agenda for them. That they are open to discuss and further develop this one. So if we compare it to other countries, that we consider that as a good practice, and we're encouraging states to also do the same way. But we need to understand as well that the enabling environment for the case of the Sami is already provided. They already have the Sami parliament, their rights are protected. So that is also necessary to make sure that there's effective participation of indigenous peoples in the development process. As we speak today, for example, we still see a lot of indigenous leaders facing threats because they are defending their lands against development projects. Right? If you're already aware of the case of Berta Cáceres and hundreds of nameless indigenous women and men and communities who are up to this day are in the front line defending their lands because of agribusiness coming in, mining coming in, and now they are put in the name of sustainable development. So we are still facing that kind of situation. And just to re-echo my colleagues, that's why it's very critical for us that the only way we can effectively engage and be part of the SDG is the protection of our rights to our land, territories, and resources, our right to our self-governance, our right to self-determined development. Because if without that enabling environment, we will remain invisible.
I think Joan talks all the questions, but to echo what she said, the political will, I see that just through some national plan for the sustainable development that's organized by some countries, but those one, for me, they are not participatory because it's still the man sitting in the offices and calling themselves expert who are putting down all the writing and saying this is the sustainable development plan of my country. For me, it's supposed to be much participatory in order to have this political willing reaching out to all the communities who need this development and who need this change. And secondly, the country leadership, I mean, when you take my continent, the Africa where I come from, we do not see who is willing to take the leadership in sustainable development goal. I mean, they divided the objective. Some countries put more the focus on security. This is the case of Chad and most of the sub-Saharan countries, where they said if we do not have a security, we cannot achieve a sustainable development goal. and then they put all the effort there. So how about the food security of the peoples? How about the access to education? How about the gender? So all the rest of the objectives are becoming much treated. And of course, Norway is a good example, but also because they have the institutional organization of indigenous peoples. So in most of the countries, it's not the case. Then specifically in Africa, we have like indigenous peoples organized through the major group, leading here by Joan, where we are making our input just at the international level. And this is pity because the development is not at the international level. The development is at the national level, at the local level. How they can ensure the capacity of these local authorities to respect the indigenous people's rights and to involve them. Of course, we are victims, but we are also the solutions. That's the thing they have to understand, because we are giving the value add on this sustainable development. We are not accepting each kind of development that they want to bring home, like into the infrastructure. If I can give you the example, many countries want to build a big buildings and having like a big facilities. And for us, this is not a development. This development leads us to all the crises around the world. What we need is how we can develop our local skill, how we can valorize our innovations, how we can valorize our knowledges, and that have to pass through our full and effective participation. And like it's time to go back to us, to those people who have this relationship with the environment, listening from us, and then building from down to top.
Entonces, okay. It's necessary to be very clear about the context of the countries where the SDG will be implemented, and with whom, with which sectors. In Latin America, as you know, the economic policy of the government is based on the exploitation of natural resources. When we talk about climate change impact, the solution is clean, no? Clean electricity, no? Is based with natural resource that is owned by indigenous peoples, are in indigenous territories. That's why we think it's a big challenge, not only for states or government, but for us too, how we can make a bridge between states and organizations to have these SDGs with a good solution for all. Because we have, as indigenous peoples, we are in rural area where we took care of the resources. But we have the interest of the national society thinking that their right is to take that, to develop economically. In this situation, we think it's necessary to strengthen the mechanisms, indigenous mechanisms institutionalized, but two, in the structure of the state or government. Many times we suffer racism because we are coming from countries where the colonization was not 500 years ago. The neo-colonization is today. And in this case, for example, the recognition of lands as individual property is very bad, not only for us, for indigenous peoples, for the country. Because if everything has the value only as economic, as money, what will happen with the real life, no? Many times we talk about how the racism have the implication in the exercise of power and decision. Because if the official society never consider that we have rights, and as indigenous peoples we have specific rights as individuals and as collective, I think that's the principal barrier. But when all society understand that we are indigenous and we are the rich part of the society too, as history, for many things, as knowledge, but as research, as capability, we need to transit to the recognition of persons as human beings and eliminate all kind of racism and discrimination. Because if we talk about the three first objectives, okay, who are the principal actor to take care or to see what happened with indicators? Now we don't have possibility to present a specific statistics, for example, because we are in the global, not historically included. Now we want to transit to be visible in indicators, but in advances and specific policies and with a specific budget. We are part of these states and governments. We try to contribute. We are not only victims. We are people giving efforts, knowledge, and trying to resolve the problems of our society too. We think that this agenda and implementation is a very big opportunity to have a very clear map in our countries and in our societies. But we need to see from grassroots to up. We are here in United Nations. For us, it's very important because when we decide something here, we as activists try to see what we can do in grassroots and in communities, because we want to develop rights for everybody, not only for us. We produce food, for example. I'm coming from Andes. Everywhere is the potatoes or many new foods resistant to climate change is coming from my region. Why not? Why we can't recognize that kind of, how do you say, aportes? Values, yeah. The contribution principally, no? We are not keeping only for us. We share. We need to be recognized as citizens and as peoples who give that kind of solution to the world, including taking care of our resources, food, and medicines. That's our reality.
Thank you. Mauricio Guerrero, Mexican News Agency. There is an emphasis in the design of these SDGs to include private investment and corporations in the way of public-private partnerships. But we know that the main damage to the indigenous community has been through mining and hydroelectrical projects, basically. So can you reconcile this emphasis, or are you concerned on this emphasis of the private investment to solve these issues of development for indigenous people? And is it possible to reconcile the interest of the private corporations with the interest of the indigenous people. Thank you.
Actually, this is the tough one, because when we see the discussion on the SDGs and they talk about the finance, they encourage more now the cooperation between public and private, and they are expecting more funding coming from the private. And as indigenous people, so you already said that we have a bad example of the relationship with the private sectors. And it's still until now, we have the example of the Standing Rock this year in US that our colleagues from Indian nation, where they are facing this land grabbing and water resources just by doing this coal development on non-sustainable way. So for us, the public-private relations, maybe it can be work, but how? Because this confidence to give them the access to again explore our land, to again displace peoples, we are not ready for it because we already get the bad examples. I can give you the example of Chad. We do not have big resources maybe, but we have petrol. There was a pipeline from Chad across all the forests of Cameroon to Douala, more than 1,000 kilometers, just to flow the petrol from Chad to there. And this one crossing a lot of miles of land and is displaced indigenous peoples from the forest area in Cameroon and the pastoral area in Chad, where the petrol just outside like flew in the soil and pollute all the pasture there. But no one can talk. Why? Because they are the one who are holding the money, who are giving the government, and then they are saying is the development. So then now, if they come back, they say, okay, well, we need a sustainable way of development. I think the private sector now, because they do not have choices, they have to come back and just to say, oh, guys, come down. We are going to have like a sustainable way of investment, and then we will respect the right of indigenous peoples, and then maybe we will involve you. But how they will do with the damage they already done? I think the best way to cooperate maybe is to start from the zero to see how the damage already made can be repaired. And from this one, how we will be fully engaged to design a new model of investment. Of course, each country needs a private sector development. But we do not need a private sector who will drive the politic of countries, who can drive all the policies, who can put the money by driving them on ideas. This is the conflict of interest, and we are not ready to accept the conflict of interest. So we need to have more public engagement, public money, and then public can drive the private, because private is not an institution who represent all the peoples, but the government represents normally all the citizens. So they must decide and give the guidance to the private sectors. And in this way, the rules of indigenous peoples are clear. We are part of the citizen, and we are part, maybe more than the private sector. We do not giving money, but we are giving more than money, the value, the necessity of all the humanity. We are conserving the diversity, the value of human being, and the dignity of the peoples. That's what we are giving. So then private sector need us, public need us, and this cooperation have to be a partnership in the very beginning level and with the full and effective respect of indigenous people's rights.
I'm happy that you raised that, because the indigenous peoples major group has seriously expressed its concern over the high dependence on public and private partnership to finance the implementation of the SDGs. And it's still in the context of business as usual. So that's the danger there, because it's driven again more by the interest of the private sector for profit rather than the public interest or rather than addressing social needs. If you look at the global partnership platforms now, the one with the biggest number is on the economic growth, and that is the public-private partnership, where they have more appetite to support economic growth, industrialization over social, the social dimension of the SDGs, like quality education, social protection measures. So these are health, for example, these are not getting private support. So what's happening now, and that is the risk. We defined it as a risk, and a serious risk for indigenous peoples, because the private sector is aiming at getting again our natural resources and putting it in the name of partnerships for sustainable development. That is not at all compatible to the essence of sustainable development. So this kind of partnership should. There needs to be a paradigm shift in the way we view partnerships to support the SDGs. And this should be based more on global solidarity in providing the needs of those furthest left behind. And the aspirations of people, that should be the driving force of any partnerships, and should be guided by the respect for human rights and the aspirations of these people. Because otherwise, it will not make a dent in really making sure that the SDGs will not lead to further inequality. Because that's what we're dealing now. The economic power is still in the name of corporations. The wealth. In fact, we can address poverty. We have enough finance. We have enough resources to uplift everyone from poverty. But the problem is it's concentrated. No? There is no redistribution of wealth. So partnership should also lead to redistribution of wealth, to equitable benefit. Because if the public-private partnership will proceed in terms of business as usual, then I can already imagine that indigenous peoples, who are the ones in the resource-rich areas, will again be sacrificed. And the sad thing is, we will be sacrificed in the name of sustainable development.
Okay, I want to add something. It's another contradiction, because if you know the newspapers and the tragedies in many countries, the situation of the workers are not respected. The salaries are not good. We have young people working 12 hours for minimum salary, for business, for private business. Who control that? In other case, for example, the mining company, in agreement with the state, entered to the territories of indigenous peoples in one region. When you read the information about malnutrition, the highest malnutrition is in the area of this mining company. What happened with the fund, with the economic distribution? That's why it's not, we can't see a solution, because it's a conflict of interests. We think that the government must defend our rights because we are citizens too. But now, for example, in many countries said we need to promote the investment, international investments. And the rules are very flexible for internationals. and what happened with the national interest. It's not only the budget, it's not only the money. That's our problem. As you know, the impact of mining exploitation is terrible for indigenous peoples and for young women. The trata, the sexual exploitation, are killing the Mother Earth. Then the environmental too is in crisis. The water, clean water, what happened with all of that? We think it's necessary to think in another way of develop economy. We need to develop to be who is the more richness in the world. We think it's necessary to know who is the very happy people over the world and healthy and satisfied with the life, and how is the relationship between them. I think it's necessary to change that kind of paradigm, because we are only people of the world. If the catastrophe come, they will not choose only for poor or only for indigenous. The catastrophe will impact to all of us. I think it's necessary to strengthen the notion of collectively as a human being.
Thank you very much. Last question.
And Charles, Baltic Review. How effective has the use of the Uncle Club Room on the 3rd floor of the Secretariat building been in getting the message of Indigenous peoples out to the media and the world? And can you tell us more about the Indigenous News Organization?
Sorry, I think the reporter is referring to the media zone we had during the permanent forum here on the 3rd floor in April.
Yeah.
I think, Joan, were you there? So
yes. Yeah, I think that that media zone that we had provided a good space for Indigenous journalists to also use their skills to further amplify the issues of Indigenous peoples, and we will have that again on Monday. Yeah, so it's in your question on how far our messages are reaching out. I think if we compare it in the past, there is already a recognition that Indigenous peoples will always be speaking out. And that the issue of land, the issue of our identity is already raising the bar on how states are going to respond to what we are demanding. It's a the problem is that it's a political issue. Our existence is a very political issue for government. So even if there is already a growing awareness, they take it as a big issue because of the issue of self-determination and our right to lands and territories and resources, which they don't want to provide or accept, recognize, and respect. And that is always where the battle we have with Indigenous peoples. In fact, now there's a big debate on the enhanced participation of Indigenous peoples in the UN system. We're demanding that we should be able to get a seat, for example, in the General Assembly, because we are peoples. And suddenly, a lot of a number of states are coming together against that, against us having more space in the UN, because they see us as a threat, more than as a partner, more than as a rights holder, that they actually benefit if they only recognize us for who we are and the contributions that we make. So unless states reconcile and come to terms with our existence, with our rights, and what we can contribute, it will always remain like that. So even if we generate more attention, we need to put more pressure as well yeah, to states to come to terms with that reality. And we hope the media can help us sustain that kind of attention and just keep on hammering that whether they like it or not, we exist. We exist. And like other peoples of the world, we have dignity. And the humanity will benefit for what we are bringing. Cultural diversity, our values of solidarity, our values of reciprocity, our values of respecting Mother Earth, our values of sustainability, these are all what we have. And that is something that we are presenting to the rest of the world and to states to finally come to terms. Thank you.
Please go ahead. Okay, I will have two more questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to, I'd asked, I see this as in being in the context of that high-level political forum on the SDGs. And I'd asked Wu Hongbo whether civil society, not just civil society, but in this case, indigenous groups can actually, is there a formal process for commenting on the voluntary reports that are going in? And if so, do you think it's a meaningful process? I mean, I know there's a lot of debate about how indigenous people can participate, but is it a formal process? I've seen mention of a report from Nepal that's pretty critical of the Nepal report, but overall, do you think that there's enough of a listening to and what could be done to make this review process more accessible to people? Thanks.
Yeah, I've been into the thick of things there on the VNR process, and one of the demands of the major groups was how can civil society, including indigenous peoples, engage in the process? Like, for example, in the UPR, where there is a formal engagement, right? So that is not provided yet. But for now, if you notice, there was a questionnaire that was sent for civil society to respond to, and for expression of interest to speak, because now they opened up some space for civil society to ask questions to states when they make the report. So now our delegation coming from the VNR countries are discussing with other from civil society. The way it's done now is that they have to come together to agree on who will be the speaker and what questions to ask. Because, again, you cannot just be asking questions from the floor. It has to be sent first to the respective states so that they can prepare the response. So there is somehow a movement in terms of how we can engage at the global level on the VNR process. And for me, the VNR should, at the outset, provide for engagement at the national level and local level, because that's where it will be implemented, and that's where it matters. And access to global processes is almost zero if you talk about indigenous peoples. I mean, we're fortunate that we're here to question states, but just imagine the millions of indigenous peoples who are invisible at the country level and doesn't have any access further on. But again, this is something that I think is evolving in the HLPF process. We keep on pushing. At least the major groups are together in pushing more space, more engagement, and more accountability of states when they report on the progress. And what I anticipate in the coming years is going to be a war on data when states report on their achievements. And that is, again, an arena where we need to speak out. We need to be part of the data generation. We need indigenous people. We should be the one measuring how progress is done. Because if governments are going to report on the progress of indigenous peoples, that is not based on a participatory reporting and monitoring system at the national level, then we will all hear all these good things that's happening, right? That's what you hear at the global level. But it's a complete disconnect with what's happening on the ground and at the national level. So that's what we also want to prevent. We want to show the realities that we have. And that's also why we're here. We want to point out that, hey, states you need to be participatory, because if not, we are going to bring the realities. Whether you like it or not, we will be speaking of the realities that we face, the gaps and the challenges that we face, and also what we are contributing that you are not even acknowledging.
Hindou, yeah.
Just to add, the fear is to do not go back to the MDGs, because it was no process where all the non-actor parties can contribute, and at the end of the day, we didn't get like a concrete solution where we can have the 15 goals achieved. So here is the way they're conducting this one is really not appropriate, because people cannot give them the previous question that they have, and then countries have to agree, they accept, okay, we are okay just to ask us these questions. So where is the level of transparency that they want? I mean, where is the level of engagement of the peoples that they want, if they want to control everything? So maybe they can just sit down and ask the question themselves and respond. I mean, for me, it's a much folkloric way of playing than the real way of engaging peoples. So they want to use this to say, okay, we are opening the door and you are all participating. But it's not true if you want to control what I'm going to say. So why are you giving me the floor? I mean, I have very critical way of viewing what they are programming now. And there is something else I just here before I came here for the high-level political forum. There is 10 countries, all the developed country, of course, who are sitting down in New Jersey just discussing on report. And this report, they are calling it scientific report for SDGs. And this report will be presented during the General Assembly, who will be endorsed by the countries. When I discuss with these technical peoples, I mean expert peoples, they want to sit down as, for example, the IPCC report on the climate change. So they won't create any small body of the IPCC for the SDGs, but only by 10 countries. And sitting only in New Jersey, they do not have any other right to go outside the countries, and they have to produce this report. I felt that, how about the 196 countries at the UN? Are they part of the Sustainable Development Goals? Are they part of this world? Is it the 10 countries going to decide for all the others to really define the development? I mean, the injustice is in different level, from developed and developing, from organizational way and structural way, the mechanism, and then indigenous peoples, we is still like left behind of all this. What can be work? It's really to go beyond this ideology of controlling everything, to just be confident as human person without calling themselves, I'm an expert because I have PhD, and you are not an expert because you are coming from the indigenous peoples. So just attacking the people at the same way, you are all expert in your life or expert in your land. So just to bring whatever that you have as solution to build our better world. I mean, the Sustainable Development Goal is just like how we can have the better life. So we won't have the better life. We have to include all the peoples at the same equal way. And this we can succeed. So hopefully that they will change the mind and come back with the new mechanism where our constituents who are well organized can give them the solution and we can input on it.
Shall we take the last question?
Thank you. I'm Amy Lieberman with DevEx. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about both the process to gain formal representation or seat at the General Assembly and kind of what that's looking like right now and the challenges you're facing with that. And then also, you mentioned this war on data, as you were saying, and I know there are many indicators that I guess make up the SDGs and the targets, and there's been a really long process to establish those. And kind of what's involved right now with interpreting those indicators as you're thinking about the SDGs really on the ground level, and if you're finding them to be helpful in really thinking about some of the goals that you might have for your communities or the work that you're doing, or if you find them not really so applicable to what you're trying to really achieve and work towards. Thank you.
I can just jump in briefly. Actually, the indicators that fix it, are they really consultative? Are they reflecting all the realities of the peoples? So, I mean, for me, the process is still the standard that they were using. Getting some expert people's discussion in comma, full stop, and must, and will, and all those wording, and putting the standard concept we need, like how do you say, a criteria, we need like a data and others, and involving like the small circle of the peoples who always doing that and have been convinced about them on a strategy. So to be practical at the national level, when like I go back home, I want to talk about goal 1, reducing poverty. I cannot just take the goal 1 and telling them, here is the color of the goal 1, and people listen, here are the indicators, put it at the international level. You need to follow up if you want to go out from the poverty. They can never understand, and that cannot work. And then the majority of the peoples do not know about it. So what can work is just to telling them the reality that they are living with it. I can tell them we are poor because our land is grabbing, because our environment is shrinking and is impacted. So how we can do better to find water, how we can manage better our natural resources in order to survive well, how we can maybe have a contact or discussion with the doctor or with educator, then we can get to school, we can get health. So then people can understand. So I think the measuring of these indicators will be problematic because most of them are not reflecting the realities. So we need to leave the general issues, maybe to report back at the international level to satisfy certain kind of groups, but we have to go at the reality national level to discuss with the peoples and see whatever that we want, what will change the life of peoples, what they really want to see. And that can help us to monitor better. And then when countries come to reporting back, they will have something to report. When they consult with us, because it's a process. For me, it's not only an information to say we have the SDG, we report it, and here we are the country, we make a plan, and we are going to implement it. No, it's a process. Each region of each country have his different realities and priorities. And from this one, if they make a national consultations through each region and the national authority with the national indigenous peoples, will discuss them on priorities and they will implement it. And then they have something to report back. So this process, if it's not established, so we cannot talk about the indicator that putting already in the way.
Okay. Just to respond to, because that was raised in relation to what I said earlier, the war on data that I referred to is because after 5 years or so, countries will have to report on progress, and they need to report based on data. That's the process, right? And at least now there's an opening that the data should not just be the ones coming from national statistics offices, but also what is called the ecosystems of data, meaning from various sources. And data should not just be statistics, but also qualitative data. And that is the more important for indigenous peoples. The data that will come out more from outcome indicators and indicators that relates to the respect or recognition of our rights. So one of the indicators that we're pushing for is the indicator on land rights. And we are referring to the customary collective land rights. And I want to emphasize that because the debate now in terms of the indicator on land rights is the issue of within the context of property rights as individual rights. And that will really going to make it worse even for indigenous peoples if we're going to talk about land rights as individual property rights. That's a very, very serious, it has very, very serious implication if the indicator will be presented like that. So what we're pushing is really the securing customary land rights, but also in relation to our practice of traditional occupations based on the use of our land. Because even if we have secure land, if we are prevented to do our traditional occupations, then that is still not a recognition or realization of our right over our lands and resources. So they have to come together. So there should be not just one indicator, but related indicator or some proxy indicator to that will that will measure how far our rights are being recognized and how far we are enjoying those rights, or that we are fulfilling those rights. So that's on the indicator work. But like I said, we already have an initiative from our end as indigenous peoples to generate the data in relation to the respect, recognition, and fulfillment of our rights. And we call this the Indigenous Navigator. It's a participatory, it's a set of tools where communities will generate their own data based on their situation, and based on the data, they can actually make their own plans, because the data will show what the specific condition that they have. So that is the one that we want to contribute in this process, and we hope that we will gain support as we generate those data. And for the overall SDG, I think we need to also give special attention to citizen-generated data rather than just data coming from the National Statistics Office.
I want to add something from indigenous women's perspective and indicators. For example, on about education, we are trying to see and to participate what kind of indicator will represent to indigenous young women to obtain a better condition of life or better work, because to have work with dignity is one of objectives, an important thing. In this situation, if we don't consider a specific indicator for indigenous young women, it's not possible to see how is implemented that indicator, because the education is the worst in public education for poor people. The what's the common employ for indigenous young women? The worst is to be servant from the community, to go to work as servant. The other thing, when they finish the primary and secondary school, they can't compete for a good job in the cities. They have to obtain the marginal works, working 12 hours a day for minimum salary, from 10 in the morning to 10 at night. They can't have opportunity to continue studying or acquire other capabilities. And because the salary is low. In this situation, we need specific indicators for that kind of issues. It's the same when you talk about malnutrition or health, for example, no? What kind of service of health we have in public services? The worst. What happened with the budget? What happened in rural areas? We need a very serious commitment of the governors on these kind of indicators, because now we can participate and make suggestions and try to contribute with our knowledge and capability to be real that indicators. But the other thing is we need politicians thinking not only on the period of power. We need politicians with long time of view and with vision, because we have governments 5 years, 4 years, and they are thinking only on the short time of programs. We need long time of programs, because in this case, we can't change each 5 years. No, we need to develop the SDGs with long-term vision.
Thank you very much. I think big thank you to our speakers and for you for coming. Thanks very much.